Hey everybody, what's up? Circus here, coming at you with the discussion video. Tonight we're going to be talking about Backrow. Is it a necessary evil? Rye talks about it all the time on stream. We
That's
are
right.
in a heavy Backrow meta. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it necessary?
Well,
That's what we're going to talk about here, Rye. Is it necessary?
to start off with, it is necessary in Duel Links to have
Hmm.
good back row. That is what PDS talks about this all the time. Interaction on your opponent's turn is solely based on trap cards and quick play spell cards, and occasionally some monsters like Madame Veer has heavy interaction on your opponent's turn. The
Right.
Curry monsters, not so much, interaction on your opponent's turn.
Hmm.
Um, and without that level of interaction, you would have pretty much every OTK deck would just come in and just mop the floor with you. Like, what are you supposed to do? So clearly, back row is good for the game. Like, you need some level of interaction. When you look at it in like the grander scheme of things, you look at TCG, for example, they have what's called like hand traps, and they have powerful hand traps that are basically bad aim but activate from your hand. An effect goes off, boom, you pop it.
Oh,
So
wow.
literally on your turn zero, you're able to do stuff like that. And that's just the nature of the game evolving to that point.
Now, have you ever
Now,
played a TCG? I've played a few where you can't interact with your opponents. Like I go, you go, I go, you go, and that's really frustrating because it's like I would like to stop that, but I
yeah.
can't.
So what's important is the balance, right? The proper
Hmm.
balance of, if I go first, I'm able to set something up. But if I set something up, I'm not going to be, then, you're still going to be able to play. Just, you have to play through my board. So like an example of another time where I believe the meta was imbalanced, which I do believe our current back row situation is imbalanced. Keep that in mind. I don't think it should be nerfed into the ground. I do think it needs to be there for interaction on your opponent's turn so we don't get OTK constantly, but it is an imbalance. The last time I believe that this happened was when Six Samurai was at its fullest, and you had like the Shien with the dual wield and the World Legacy Clash combo, right?
Right, that was
Because you
terrible.
like you had nothing.
Yeah,
There's nothing you could do, right? If you play one card only to take out the Shien, you would just get World Legacy Clash and lose. If you play multiple cards, you would get dual wielded and lose. If you tried to do
right.
nothing, you would just get beat down and lose.
Yeah,
And then you still have to play through and that's you're still playing through the Shien negate, which is already taxing in itself.
right.
And that was something Konami quickly, adjusted. Another time that it was out of balance is when Dark Lords had heavy, heavy, heavy monster negation. But let's be realistic. If Dark Lords were to come back in today's meta, Fiendish Chain is now the answer to that annoyance
Hmm.
of Dark Lords, right? You can't play as carelessly to Dark Lords. So now if Dark Lords were to come back, it'd be a lot more balanced than they were. Now we're finding ourselves in a meta where these decks rather that play, low cost, high gain monsters. I'm specifically Shiranui, the Gokis, any deck that's literally able to just, oh, I'm just going to use my graveyard, bring out a big monster. Oh, I'm going to use level augmentation, bring out a big monster. Oh, I'm going to search because I ballista squatted my monsters and I get to search more monsters that have 3k plus attack. Um, you know, when you're able to do that and you have heavy back row, it gets really overpowering because if they go first, establish Sun Saga set 3, because you always remember Sun Saga set 3, that's always like, oh my God, I'm triggered, right? But you never remember, like in the best of 3, that same person, okay, they just set one, they T set and it's just a Ballista Squad and
A
the level
level
2
two.
tutor,
Yeah.
right? Like you never think about that because it's not like they're gonna God hand you every time, but you're gonna remember the times that you God hand you.
Okay, so my
Um,
question is, we got two cards on the screen right now, Ballista Squad and Raigeki Break.
mhm.
These cards, they have a cost, but with some decks, it almost feels like they don't have a cost. Were they
Yeah.
designed that way, do you think, or do you think we're exploiting that?
So I do believe it was designed for that because Ballista Squad comes out in the Shiranui box, not well, the follow-up box rather.
Raigeki
The
Break came out with Shiranui.
with the original,
Yeah.
yes, and then Ballista came out with the Ghost Meets Girl card, which is intended with Shiranui in mind. So I do believe that Konami was thinking about Shiranui um, when they released both those cards, right? Like that's what you would think. Um, So when we're kind of in that position, you're just kind of like, okay, clearly they were thinking about Shiranui. So you have to think that this was an intended effect, especially since Shiranui lost access to Econ, which essentially did what Ballista did. If you know your monster get floodgated or whatever like that, you can Econ take, tribute Econ, and then you have a monster in your grave afterwards. So I do believe it was intended. They just didn't realize how effective it would end up being
Because a lot
in
of
the
people
future.
say, Rye, is Ballista Squad a good card? And it's like, yes, but maybe.
Technically, yeah. So the big problem, the imbalance that we're in right now, the fiendish chain to the Dark Lords, or the whatever you want to the Six Samurai, the counter, the heavy monster counter to Dark Lord or to Six Scams, is we don't have good back row removal options, right? Um, the only thing we have is Cosmic Cyclone. That's the best one.
Mhm.
And then Hatronade. And that one is so good that it literally gets nerfed immediately when it comes out the gate, right?
Right.
That's the problem, right? If a deck has access to Trinade and it's good, it's just OTK, 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 OTK,
Yeah.
OTK. It's not fun for anybody, right? You
Yeah,
can only
because
do
it's a
OTK
disgusting
combos 4
card. They
times.
get that on their first turn, and it's just
It's
over.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah, like there's
it's like,
nothing you can
I
do.
guess I can't interact.
So that would, so just the fact that Hatronade exists and you see that constantly happening, you can tell, okay, back row is a good thing for the game. It
Right.
does keep the game interesting and makes it, the problem is when you lose off of one single back row. For example, when I was doing my Rise to Cog challenge, I didn't have Cosmic Cyclone, right, free to play. So if they set one floodgate, I lose.
Oh,
There's
okay.
nothing I can do. You know what I mean? The answer to that is back row removal, right? So control the back row. If actually having to use your brain, not just hey true nade and then immediately go into my combos. Instead, okay, let me set a card, read the delays, no delay, maybe floodgate. Now I cosmic cyclone, or go for the 50-50 cosmic cyclone, or wait for him to activate something, then go for the cosmic cyclone. That's interaction. That's good for the game. That's you having to use your brain to think of plays. When you look at other back row removal, we have besides those two being pretty much the best ones, we have Galaxy Cyclone, and we have Night Beam, right? Those are like the big ones that everybody's using, especially in Witchcrafters. Witchcrafter really utilized those two, and then Storm occasionally.
Oh,
The
yeah.
only really Witchcrafter and Cyber Dragon ended up using that. The problem that all these cards have, they're not quick play. They're not quick play. So all you can do is they're very reactive on your turn. You get to use them and try to snipe out back row and attempt to find back row in a way, instead of actually like the most you can do is make your plays, try to bait something out, and then go for a night beam play, which isn't exactly it's not a cosmic cyclone. That's the point.
Right.
And then if you go first and you open it, it's useless. Where a cosmic cyclone, you go first, can really, like if let's say you just go first and you set up your board and you set one cosmic cyclone, your opponent plays Shiranui, Sun Saga, sets 3. Well, in that end phase, you can at least take out one of the back row. And now it's like you have a chance. You're not going to get
Right.
completely obliterated by crazy amounts of back row.
So
You
my
have a chance to actually play.
So my question is, there's decks that utilize the back row that we have on the screen fairly well, and then
Uh-huh.
there's possibly other decks that aren't very good in
Mhm.
general, or maybe wouldn't survive in the meta without all this back row. Where are you at with decks like that? I'm thinking right now, Gokis. Now everybody's gonna be like, Circus, I hate you, I love Gokis, but without like
Well,
all that back row, are they a viable deck?
no, I mean obviously no. The back row carries those decks, right? But also what you see in those decks is usually some form of interaction with said back row. So for example, Gokis, you have Ballista Squad can trigger their effects. You can use them occasionally. Another one, Valkyries, another back row deck. They have that one monster that excavates back row and lets you add it to the hand. So there's like some play there. You can't, for example, I don't know what's like a crappy archetype that came up. Like wind-ups, for example, right? People started playing wind-ups, put a bunch of back row in it, tried to play it, didn't work out. It
Right.
wasn't the thing that happened. Unlike Gokis that did cling on. Yes, back row do carry these decks, but also these decks would be back row oriented decks you know, and obviously if Goki we had Links, they'd play completely different. The whole game would be different. But how we are now in Duel Links, Gokis would be a back row deck, regardless if back row was in style or not in style. Same with a deck, for example, Yosenju. Yosenju, your board's always going to be open. You need back row. That's just how it works, right? It's not like like an ancient gear where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to play the 2 Drowning Mirror Forces in this deck because I don't need to. I'm going to play Sphere Kribo instead, for
Right.
example. Or Blue Eyes that occasionally switches from back row heavy to non-back row heavy deck and playing Sphere Kribo as well to try and prevent OTKs. These are decks, you know, I understand people complain about them. They're heavy back row, but they're intended to be heavy
Right.
back row decks. Like that's just how they function. Yes, the back row carries them and they'd be garbage without them. Sure, with no back row would be really, really bad, right? We can see like, yeah, there's the whole combo Shiranui thing is like falling off now. It's not even as amazing as it once was. It's really Catan, the trap card, that's like
It's all about the
everyone's
hybrid
afraid of.
Shiranui now.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so so like these decks, yeah, like this card has a graveyard effect or has a search effect. Ballista Squad, it makes sense, right? It just totally makes sense, especially being able to hit back row with Ballista Squad or Regeki Break on top of that. Again, in a heavy, heavy negligence against back row.
Mhm.
Um,
Well,
so I
here's a
think,
question for it. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go
go.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say,
I was
like,
gonna-
I was gonna say, if I was Konami, I would sit down and be like, the answer to this meta to make it more balanced, make it more fair. Because if you actually look at the decks that get played right now, they're not really that, there's Karakuri, Kristrons, Ritual Beast. These are not back row decks, right? The biggest back row decks are like what, Shiranui, and is that really it? I don't really know if there's anything else right now being played.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Yeah, not
I mean,
offhand.
that's really the big one, and then there's like the occasional rogue decks that are back row that pop up. Weather Painters, today,
I,
Blackwings are not back
I was
row.
gonna say ritual
Heroes
beasts
are not
aren't
back
real
row.
back row heavy. I mean, they have
Yeah,
some, but not a
I'm
whole lot.
I'm looking through all the battle phase winners. I'm looking through the battle phase top 8 decks, and yeah, it's like Blue Eyes and Shiranui. Those are the
Right.
heavy back row. Yeah, Karakuri is playing more back row if they're playing Restart, but it's usually like Fiendish Chain, Karma Cut, and then their archetype back row. So if I were Konami, I'd look at that. Oh, Magician Girls. Yeah, that's the new hotness. Magician Girls
Right.
back row. If I were Konami, I'd look at this and be like, all right, release Magical Space Typhoon. It's time. it's
I
time.
think I just had it on the screen too.
Yeah, it's quick play. It's destruction, not banishing, so it is weaker than Cosmic. It does not trigger skills. And now decks that have access to Cosmic Cycle can run Cosmic and Mystical Space Typhoon. And the decks that cannot play Cosmic Cyclone, they don't have to sit there and play a super passive game. So they have to, grind through all the back rows, summon Casitas, sit on Casitas. They can just play Mystical Space Typhoon, don't have to play 1,000 to activate skills, so it's significantly weaker. And now they can be a little bit more aggressive with their plays, thus making the meta faster, making it feel healthier to the players that are playing it. So it's not as frustrating. You don't get as frustrated playing it.
Now this one obviously destroys rather than banishes, so that's a whole different feature in the game. It's a whole different strategy. My
Yeah.
question with these generic back row, I notice a lot of them. I brought it up before. Don't really have a cost per se. Do you feel that like these generic back row, there's no restrictions either? Because we were talking about in another video, archetype specific back row, and we really don't see that a whole lot. Where you play something like Subterra Final Battle, that's a perfect one, right? It has like it's very specific to the archetype, and it gives bonuses to the archetype and things like that. We don't really see that a whole lot because there's restrictions. You can only summon this kind of monster. You can only play these kind of monsters, and where are you with that? Should back row be one more specific to the archetype, and the two, if it's not, should it have more of a cost? Because like the ones I was talking about, the archetypes, those have the restrictions, which are kind of a cost.
Yeah.
Whereas these other ones, like I guess Needle Sealing, in theory, you might be popping your own monster. Ballista Squad, you're supposed to be tribute a monster. Cosmic Cyclone, you're supposed to be paying life points. So there's supposed to be some kind of downside for you. But then like other ones like Floodgate, there's no downside for you.
Floodgate probably shouldn't exist. If we're being totally honest, 3
Okay.
monster zones, and we don't have like a Book of Life, for example, which is another quick
What, to
play
flip it back up?
card to flip it back up. Yeah, so like you get summoned, you flip it back up. Yeah, so I've said this on stream before. I am super in the favor of archetype specific anything. The more generic something is, the more abusable it gets.
Hmm.
You don't even have to even look at Backrow. Look at something like Winda. She's in
Right.
everywhere. For
Yeah.
any stall deck, you
She
just
shows
put
up to
Winda
every
in.
party now, doesn't she?
Yeah, and it's like it sucks because I feel for those Ritual Beast players if something were to happen to Winda because people are playing it in a stall deck that's just super annoying to break.
Hashtag free
Konami
the fox.
free the fox. Yeah, exactly. Ludolite
Yeah.
Fox. She got murdered, and like Ludolites weren't popping off, and that wasn't the
Right.
reason she got murdered. It was because of Neos. Neos takes another one. Now Neos is gone. He's in jail, and
But
they're
the
not releasing
fox.
Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, he took him down with him. So I'm always gonna say archetype specific stuff is gonna be way more exciting and way more, yeah, like you said, Subterra Final Battle. Just it's an amazing trap card, but only for Subterrors. And then yeah, cards like Canadia, Floodgate specifically, there are decks that literally, if Shiranui did not have Ballista Squad, they would just lose to a single Floodgate. Like that's how crazy that
Right.
is when
You
you
could just
think about
clog
it.
their board and then.
Yeah, Blackwings have to play Forbidden Lands, so that doesn't happen to them because they don't play, Ballista
Right.
Squad. Um, so in reality, that a card like that should not exist because we don't have a reliable counter to it. That's realistic. I'm not going to play AD Changer in every deck just to avoid getting floodgated, or Forbidden Lance. Yeah, it's a good card, but if you go up against like Dragoonity, for example, and you have Forbidden Lance, what are you going to do with that? It's not as useful, you know.
Because I feel
So
like you could
especially in
take
the case of
just about any deck, throw 3 Floodgate, 3 Canadia, and then 3 of something else in there, your
it'll
choice,
be yeah.
and you're gonna at least get some turns then, and you're gonna frustrate your opponent to no end.
It also, like another big thing is in TCG, you have main phase 2, right? So a great example is, let's say, I start my main phase 1. I already have 3 monsters on the board. I go into battle phase, swing, 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 Canadia, Canadia, Canadia. That's the end of my turn. But in TCG, you would just go in, you'd flip your monsters back up, or if they got Ballista Squad in the battle phase, it's not over because then you can, or Needle Sealing, that's a really terrible one. Needle Sealing in the battle phase is like GG, you lose.
Right.
But in TCG, you would just go into the main phase 2 and be like, all right, I'm going to try to reset my board, resalvage my board, and fix things up. And from there you'll be good to go. Now, obviously, if we had more like better back row removal tools, like MST, for example, you could play smart and try to dictate like, oh, I haven't seen any triggers. That's Needle Sealing. Let me play around Needle Sealing. You get to a point where you can no longer play around Needle Sealing. Okay, now we're gonna snipe it with Cosmic Cyclone or whatever back row removal card I
Right.
have. But with such limited options, basically it's Cosmic Cyclone and everything else is just a way worse, just way, way, way worse.
Hmm.
Or you're playing a new deck that can play True Nade and you're going to just True Nade your way to victory.
Well, it just
And
seems
right
like in Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of stuff. There's always like a downside. There's always a cost to balance out the card,
mm-hmm.
and I guess getting back to that, like a lot of these are just generic and they just have no cost, and that's just seems crazy to me that
Yeah, I
you
guess
can
I guess
just.
the idea for like a card like Floodgate would be you're going second and your opponent just like if it's Kara Curry, just summon their entire hand. Floodgate's now useless. But it's
Right.
not really a cost. I know what you mean. It's not a cost. It's just the downside of the card.
Right.
Um,
So a lot
unfortunately,
of them
for
is like,
those downsides are just
discard a
not that bad.
card and then you can do this, or pay
Yeah.
1,000 life points, then you can do this. These are
hmm
just, you
Flip
know,
them. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a balancing act for sure. At the same time, you have to think like some decks having access to those generic cards can be really good if they just don't have archetype um, stuff to that really do anything. For example, you think of Yosenji, you have Yosenji's Sword Sting, which is really cool. But what if you get floodgated?
Right.
Like
Then it doesn't
now
work
now
anymore, does it?
now you need to stall until so like having a floodgate of your own could be huge, especially for example, Casitas comes out who doesn't even care about half your back row. Well, you need floodgate to take care of Casitas, who is an
Right.
archetype monster, but
Fair
you have to use
enough.
a
Yep.
generic card to get rid of him. So it's not bad to have like generic cards, but I do believe that Konami should probably hit these generic cards a little bit harder on the limit list. There's no universe where you should be able to play 3 Floodgate, 3 Canadia, 3 Fiendish Chain, and you still come out as the victor in that duel. That's probably what's going to happen. That's just, like we don't have the cards to deal with. If I get a Floodgated monster, that monster is Floodgated. Like, I don't nothing I can do about that. I have to rely on you swinging into it to get rid of it half the time, unless I'm playing like Ballista Squad or something.
How about we put them all to 2?
Put them all to 2.
Could you
Oh god.
imagine?
I think putting them all to limit 3,
3. Yeah, 3 would
and
be good.
then I would personally like to see Cosmic Cyclone come off of the limit list. It was a hit that was done for the old Element Saber.
Yep.
I think that they should have just hit the skill and not hit the card itself. I think the problem with Cosmic Cyclone being at limit 3 is it forces any card that hits the limit 3 to eventually just become slow, passive, and very safe, It's just historically everything that's been limit 3 ends up being like that, and it's just not fun for anyone involved.
Right. All
So,
right.
yeah.
I don't know. I think we got it all covered there. So necessary evil, yes. Helps decks, yes. Rye came up with a solution.
Necessary,
I
but
forgot
they're
about.
out of balance. That's what it is.
Right. And what was your solution? More hand traps, more
Yeah, more hand traps. No, just literally just release MST. I think that would literally be enough.
what about monsters that do stuff? You know what I mean? Like you come out and you can pop a card or something like that, or your opponent cannot activate effects when this.
Like that would be okay. The problem is things like Fiendish Chain, for example, already kind of stop that kind of stuff.
Well,
So
what about something? Your opponent can't even activate cards when this card is summoned, or I guess I'm just saying put it more into the monster effects rather than having all this back row or a way to counter them in the monster
yeah,
effects.
so that's basically what happened in TCG, and that ended up having to lead into hand traps because the fact that back row was just like useless at that point. They needed something else. They needed a monster
Oh,
effect
okay.
rather than a spell effect or a trap effect, and that had to be the hand trap. So I'd rather prefer to stay away from that because I don't want to enter heavy back hand trap territory. Although that's probably going to, in the next like 3-4 years we're going to have to go there. Otherwise they'll just have no cards to release for the game.
Wait, this game's gonna be around in 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, assuming it's even
Oh
still.
man, I should have signed that contract. I thought that was a
Oof.
joke.
Jeez. But yeah, I would like to avoid that as long as possible. I much rather prefer the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Of, I activate my trap card, you lose.
Right.
Instead of I activate my hand trap card, you lose. I just prefer it to be that way.
Oh, that's probably a whole nother video we could do. People losing to a single card and just
Oh my
you
god.
attack into a wall of D and it's game or whatever,
Yeah.
or back in the day it was treacherous trap hole. Remember?
Oh my god. I
Turn one treacherous
literally
trap hole. Yeah.
literally just had that happen to me. Someone TTA. They TTH'd me. It's Evil Eye. Evil Eye's running TTH. So they like TTH me turn 1. I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna lose. They didn't do anything their next turn. I was like, okay, I'm still alive. Try to make a comeback play. Evil Eye of defeat. Well, I definitely lose now.
Yeah. Everything back to the hand. Yep.
Yeah, very unlucky.
Yeah. All right. I think we got it all in there. I think we got it all in there. So we're gonna get out of here then. So the best thing you can do is tell Rye what a great job he did in the comments below, or say, Rye, you missed this. Rye, you missed that. But either
I
way,
disagree with you.
we
I
want
hate
you to
that.
interact on your turn and our turn. All right. So make sure to do that in the comments below and get into our Discord because that's where we're going to host all of our tournaments. And they're lots of fun. Rye's there. He's casting. He's having a good time. He's smiling. And if you get in our Discord, also there's a new player channel in there, which is just I think on 24 hours a day now. I think every time I check it, it's just
Yeah,
constantly
whenever I look
going.
at it, it's very rare that an unanswered question isn't answered within like 15 minutes of it being posted.
Yeah, so it's a good place to get information. So make sure to get in there. We're gonna get out of here though. I'm Circus. That's Rye.
Farewell.
We'll see you next time.